Hi, I'm Heather.
And I'm Haley.
And we're the Dunnit Sisters, a Kansas City true crime podcast. On December 30th, 2018, Christian Alvarez was shot and killed. We talked with his mom, and she told us about Christian, and she told us what happened that evening. Thanks for watching.
Christian, he was a very, very active and outgoing young man. He loved baseball and football and being outdoors with his friends and family. And he was a baseball superstar. He was always in the newspaper when he was a kid, breaking records. I think he was 10 when he broke a record. He hit like 28 home runs in 1 year, and I actually have all those balls. I saved every single one.
Did he go to Lee Summit?
No, we lived in Indiana when he was growing up.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't move here until 2012 when he was getting ready to go into middle school. So, but yeah, he was just a happy-go-lucky kid, and things kind of changed for him when I got divorced and we moved here to Kansas City. He was 12 years old. I don't think he really knew how to deal with a lot of it, and he kind of changed and became more of an introvert, and instead of getting out and playing ball and things like that, he just wanted to hang out at home with me and his sister and play video games and things like that. And maybe that was something normal that was going to happen anyways at his age. Kids change, throughout their lives on what they find interesting, what they like to do. But so we spent a lot of time together. He was always at home with Mama. And he did decide, though, he wanted to go back to Indiana for high school to be with all of his friends that he had grown up with. So I let him go back to Indiana and stay with his grandma. And about 3 months after he went back, his best friend killed himself in front of him. And that's when Christian really changed. And I think he started gravitating towards a different group of people. He struggled and found it hard to get himself back on track and smile, and he wasn't the Christian that he used to be. But towards the end of his life, when he was 19, he started working at FedEx. He had lost 100 pounds. He was smiling again. He was, interacting with me and his sister again like he'd used to. His relationship with her had become stronger like it was when they were younger. And it seemed like he found a new zest for life again, which was kind of the unfortunate thing about the whole situation is I had my son back, and then I had to lose him all over again. But this time permanently. So that's, pretty much sums up a lot of, who Christian was and what he went through and who he'd become again before someone took him so callously from us. He was an amazing person. He was a great, great uncle to his niece and nephews, and he just loved people. He was what I would call a gentle giant. He was 6'2", and before he lost weight, he was 280 pounds. So he was a big kid, and he had the biggest heart, but he kind of, sometimes I think felt like he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. So, but you'd never know it by the way he treated you, just the way he looked. So the day that all this happened, actually, I had just came home from my mom's down at the lake and had a bunch of boxes of pictures and stuff. And my daughter and I were going through them because I had lost my mom the same time a year earlier. I actually buried them on the same exact day, 1 year apart. So we were going through pictures and stuff, and Christian he had a friend over, and he came upstairs, and, he bent over and looked at a few pictures with us and stuff and said, I'm going to run my friend home, and I'll look at these pictures with you when I get back. And that was about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And said, okay. And he said, I love you, Mom, and gave me a kiss and said, I love you, Kirsten, to his sister, and, and said, I'll be back in a little bit, and it was the last time we saw him. I received a call from his best friend, probably 9:30, 10 o'clock, asking if I'd heard from him, saying that he was talking to him and he was supposed to, get back in touch with him, and he hadn't heard from him, and Christian's phone was off, and if you knew Christian always, his phone was always charged. If there was anything that Christian made sure he did during the day, it was make sure that his phone was charged, because I tried calling his phone and it went straight to voicemail. So I knew something was wrong. I knew that he didn't let it die. I knew something had happened. Because that was one of our things too, is always make sure that I can get a hold of you, or you check in if you're not going to be, I know he was 19, but he still was my baby, check in if you're not coming back like you said you were, please check in. Please let me know what's going on. So I got really anxious, and I don't know what made me do it, because I'm not really that kind of person. I don't think of negative things, but I just started Googling car accidents, murder, things like that, killing or something like that, in Kansas City, and something came up, and I think, I don't remember what news station it was, but I seen Christian's vehicle in the background on Google, and I knew right then when I seen his car there that something had happened to him. So of course I couldn't sleep. I tried calling everybody. I tried calling the friend that he was with. I tried calling the police department. They wouldn't tell me anything. And then I got a knock on the door probably about between 6 and 7 in the morning, and I just knew as soon as I seen two people sitting or standing on the front step that he was gone. Just seeing that on Google earlier in the night, and then seeing them standing there, I just knew. But I think I already knew in my heart that it was him when I seen his car sitting there on the news. And it's the worst experience you could ever go. I mean, seeing those two people standing there it's ingrained in my mind. It'll never go away. And it was the absolute worst day of my life. I thought the day I lost my mom, being an only child growing up in the home, and losing her at 59 years old, I thought that was the worst thing I could ever go through in my life. But this compounded that a million times. It's just like a parent's not supposed to outlive their child. We don't really know much, except for, the person that was with him, says that he knew the person and was talking with the person and laughing and joking, and before he went to meet them. And he went to, I don't know if he was going to the address where he was killed to meet the person, or if he was going to meet the person somewhere else and they ended up there, but he ended up at the end of Oakland Avenue in a cul-de-sac, and his car was kind of blocked in the cul-de-sac, and they shot him in the front yard. And his friend was lucky enough to not get hit by any bullets. Christian's car was pretty much a mess. There was bullet holes everywhere, and all the windows were shot out, and somehow his friend was lucky enough to escape it. But of course now he lives with a lot of, what I think my son went through, which was PTSD from what he's seen, his friend going through. And I think that that's something that his sister and I too will always deal with, that I think those people, those cops coming to my front door and standing on my doorstep, that's something that is like I said, it's ingrained in my mind, and I'll never forget it. And it's kind of like, it's trauma that I don't think that you can ever get over. But besides that, I mean, we do think that we know one person's involved, but we can't really say for sure. My daughter and I have done, I mean, that's all we did for the first 6 months after he passed away, is we tried to tie people together on Facebook and call, looking through phone numbers and phones and pictures and conversations, and basically tried to be detectives ourselves, but we don't know, and that's my only prayer every day, is that someday that we find at least one person that was involved in it, and then hopefully it leads to finding the other people that were involved in it.
And so I was just going to ask you if the person that he was with knew the people. Like
the person he was with did not know the people, but my son knew the people.
Did know the people.
Yes, at least one of them, because he was talking on the phone with them.
Can we ask if there was a motive then?
The police really have never mentioned it. I told the police that, I mean, I know Christian had been working at FedEx for a while, and he didn't believe in banks, and he did carry all his money in a bank bag underneath the seat, and I think he thought he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and he thought that his friends were his friends, and if anybody knew about that, then no one's going to try to do anything. They're his friends. No one would ever try to take his money or whatever, but it was all gone, yeah. So that's the only thing that I can think of. I mean, I can't really think of any other reason why, someone would want to kill him. I know the first thing, and that's why I try to stay so proactive, and I'm not saying I love my son any more than any other parent who's lost their child, but I continue to stay vigilant on making sure, someone pays for what they did, because my son nobody deserves it, but my son did give several people the shirt off of his back, or his last dollar in his pocket, or, use the last bit of gas in his tank to go take a friend somewhere because, they didn't have anywhere to stay or whatever, I mean, I remember going out in the driveway one day, and my son had someone sleeping in his car because he didn't have anywhere to go. And, I'd already told him, you can't bring people in that, you can't bring people in the house. I'm sorry. I mean, occasionally I would let someone stay, but if I didn't know them, and I walked out my driveway and found somebody sleeping in the car because they had nowhere to go, so it made no sense to me, because if you would have asked Christian for whatever they needed, then he probably would have loaned them money or whatever. I can't think of anything that he could have done to anybody to warrant them wanting to take his life.
And then did the friend happen to know how many people were involved?
He's seen at least 2 people.
Okay.
I have conflicting reports between the first detective and the second detective, so I can't really say. They had a Ring doorbell across the street that they seen people on. They couldn't see faces or anything on. They seen people on, and they seen gunshots coming from at least 2, but they think 3 different areas, so they think that it could have possibly even been 3 people. I know there was at least 2 different bullets in Christian, so there was at least 2 different people, and so it's conflicting whether it was 2 or 3.
And he got out of his car?
He was talking to the person in the yard, and then someone shot him. Yeah, someone came up to the car and got in the car with him for a minute in the back seat and was talking to him because it was chilly. It was December 30th, and then he got out of the car and walked up, and he was standing in the yard, and his friend was still in the car, playing on his phone and stuff, and he said he just heard gunshots and seen Christian fall.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was talking with the person.
So he went to that person's house then,
didn't he? See, the people in the house, they say there was no reason for him to be here, that they weren't involved, but the detective never interviewed her. Because the first detective, because she said if you would have seen how distraught she was because a bullet went through the side of the house where her kid's room was, then you would have known she wasn't involved. I'm like,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and every time I went over there and put a sign on the pole or whatever, when I knew she lived there, I would pull up the street and watch her rip it off. It's, I don't understand how kids his age can take lives and not realize that it's a permanent thing. I think that they think that, it's not a big deal, and when you decide to shoot somebody, it's permanent. You can't take it back. And I think a lot of it has to do with the justice system nowadays and the very short sentences that people get for committing crimes like this and callously taking someone's life. But I'll fight till the day I die anyways to make sure that someone's brought to justice. And I hurt for the parents of that person too, because not only did I lose a child, but in some ways they're going to lose a child when they have to pay the consequences for what they did. And a lot of people say, wouldn't you want to see that person, not here anymore? Wouldn't you want to see them hurting, and that's not the case, because what that does is their family is going to be the ones to suffer, not them. And I would never want to see anyone go through what my daughter, myself, and my grandchildren have went through. So I just hope someday it slows down or it stops completely, these kids taking each other's lives. I pray that the system works in my son's case, because it hasn't in a lot. When you hear on the news that somebody got 7 years for murdering somebody, it's disgusting. That person could go to jail for 7 years, get out, get married, have a family, have kids, and that's something that I'm never going to experience. I'm never going to have grandkids by my son. My daughter's probably done having kids, and I'll never have another grandkid. And it's not fair. And it's not fair for families to have to see the person that took their loved one away from them serve such a small sentence, get out, and still live their lives. I believe if you murder someone, you never see the light of day again. You go to prison for the rest of your life. That's how I feel. I feel like you took your parents can still come visit you. I'll never see my son's face again. And, I do a lot of things in the background to try to fight for that, I've emailed, the detectives. Is there anything, that you guys can do or whatever, every single week and for 4 years. And I honestly, wholeheartedly believe that if I didn't do that, my son's case would be tucked in a box somewhere. It would. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. Every time I email them, I have to live it over again, every week. Every time I send an email to the detective, I have to remind myself that my son's been murdered and he's gone. And it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. And nobody around you understands what you're going through. I know my daughter does. It's changed her forever. I feel like I basically lost both my children that day. That's your one job in life, is to protect your children. And I had a lot of guilt for a long time, feeling like wondering what I could have done differently to save him that day. And I finally had to let go of that, because I realized I wasn't a perfect parent, but I did everything I could, to make sure that he grew up to be a good human. And he was loved. He had a warm place to sleep at night. He had clean clothes to wear. And he had food to eat, and he knew he was loved, and that's the most important thing. And that's finally what I had to tell myself to let go of all those thoughts. But I think it's a normal reaction as a parent, if you were to lose someone, is what could I have done differently to maybe if I, would have been more persistent about him coming straight home after he dropped his friend off or whatever, But I think sometimes if something's going to happen, it's going to happen, and there's, I can't wrap my mind around it, because my hope is that the guilt is eating at them, that they feel the way I feel, the guilt of taking someone's life.
So we know Christian gets a phone call and that he knew the person because he was laughing and joking with them. And they told him to meet up at this address.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets there and the person gets in the car and they talk for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then that person and Christian get out and Christian is shot by at least 2 people because the ring across the street, they can see that there's firing coming. We know he was robbed because his bank bag was missing and he always kept it under his driver's seat, or the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
The bank bag has never been recovered.
Right.
So I would think that if there's any friends of his or mutual acquaintances and they've seen a bank bag, that they should call the police because that's just not a normal thing that I think people would have, bank bags. The bank bag was green.
With a white central bank logo on it. And it's zipped.
And it zipped. So we're just...
If you see one of those, it's all, like we said, usual for people to be walking around with those, so.
I would say call the tips hotline, and his family is not going to stop looking for answers. So we would appreciate it if you would share this on social media. That way people who may possibly know things can see it and then call information in.
Yeah, so please share. Thank you, everybody. We finally reached 1,000 subscribers.
Very exciting.
They're exciting. So
Yes.
keep sharing.
Yep. Thank you very much. Bye.